To the Center for Local Prosperity webinar series. This is, I think we've decided that we're now into our second season. There was just a decision, I think, that Nike, the webinar series producer, decided. So welcome to season 2 of the CLP webinar series. Today, our topic is local democracy and civic engagement. And we've got two featured guests, Robin Tress and Sera Thompson, who I'll be introducing in a little bit later, once after some initial stuff gets sorted. Just want to start with our land acknowledgement. I want to acknowledge that we are in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. This land is governed by the treaties of peace and friendship, first signed with the British Crown in 1725. Which affirmed Mi'kmaq and Wolastoqey rights and established relationships based on peace, trade, and not the surrender of land. We recognize that colonialism is not just history, but it's an ongoing reality, and that reconciliation requires continued learning, reflection, and action. We also acknowledge that the people of African descent have been in Nova Scotia for over 400 years, and we honor the historic African Nova Scotian communities, of which there are over 50, for their resilience, contributions, and ongoing pursuit of justice and equity. And I'm coming to you from Nudi-Baguadeg, near Gluska First Nation, so also known as Kemp Shore. If you happen to know that spot, it's a beautiful little spot on the water. And just the briefest of introductions to the Center for Local Prosperity, in case you don't know. We're a charity based in Nova Scotia, but we do work throughout Atlantic Canada. And we're really focused on working with rural Atlantic Canadian communities to help them become more resilient and have greater agency, through a variety of things, like this webinar series, but we do a variety of other things as well. If you want to learn more about us, our website address is centerforlocalprosperity.ca. On to the main topic for the day. So I'm going to do just a brief framing presentation before I hand things over to our two guests, just to kind of place this topic within kind of our frame, which is local prosperity, economic localization, and community wealth building. So I'll jump in there. So across Atlantic Canada, we know what it means to be shaped by place. Small towns, rural communities, islands, and regional cities where institutions aren't abstract. They're the hospital down the road, the college campus, the co-op, the municipal office, the fish plant, or the food hub. And today I want to talk about community wealth building as a democratic project. Because the real question isn't just how we grow our local economies, it's who gets to shape them and who they ultimately serve. So the challenge is that economic development has become distant from democracy, unfortunately. So we all know what it feels like when decisions are made far away, especially in Atlantic Canada, whether it's in corporate headquarters, provincial or national capitals. We see it when local suppliers lose contracts to national vendors, when young people leave because they feel that their opportunities are limited in their local community, when major assets change hands without local voices at the table. And too often people are invited to, in air quotes, kind of consult after the big decisions have already been made. And the result is not just economic leakage, it's democratic fatigue. But we are kind of here to talk about a different vision, one where community wealth building is about democratic renewal. So community wealth building offers a different path. And this is kind of an approach that we've really embraced at the Center for Local Prosperity. It says that democracy doesn't stop at the ballot box or the council chamber. It extends into our workplaces, our public institutions, our land, and our markets. And that means asking, what would it look like if our universities, hospitals, municipalities, crown agencies, and businesses saw themselves not just as service providers, but as active stewards of local prosperity? If the economy itself became something we shape together, rather than something that simply happens to us. And we're all kind of used to, in the global scheme of things, this is certainly the case more than even within the national context. So what a democratic economy looks like. In practice, a democratic economy looks very tangible. It looks like hospitals and colleges buying more food, maintenance and services from local and regional suppliers. It looks like cooperatives and social enterprises creating good jobs in places where private markets alone won't. It looks like community land trusts and housing co-ops protecting critical assets for long-term public benefit. And it looks like public dollars circulating locally, building capacity here instead of flowing out of the region. So in action, this kind of engagement isn't symbolic. It changes real outcomes. When local producers sit down with anchor institutions to design procurement systems that actually work for small and rural suppliers, millions of dollars can shift into the local economy. When workers have a voice through co-ops or shared governance, jobs become more stable and rooted. And when communities steward the land, housing, or food infrastructure, they protect affordability and opportunity for future generations. So participation translates into real economic change. So why it works and why it's relevant for Atlantic Canada. There's a practical reason that it works in regions like ours. Small communities, especially rural communities, run on relationships. Trust matters, local knowledge matters. And let's not forget, we are the home of the Antigonish movement and a thriving co-op economy as well. When policies and projects are co-created, they fit better, they last longer, and people are more willing to invest their time, energy, and political will to make them succeed. At a time when many people feel disconnected from institutions, community wealth building offers something concrete, proof that participation can lead to visible results. So there is a role for institutions in this. So this stuff doesn't happen automatically. So what we would call anchor institutions, so large public sector institutions, governments, and regional bodies have to design democracy into how they operate. That means opening up data, being transparent about how contracts and decisions are made, and investing in the capacity of community groups, small businesses, and marginalized voices to participate meaningfully. The community can't just be a stakeholder at the end of the process, it has to be a partner from the beginning. So the trade-off is that democracy is slower, but it's stronger. So we should be honest about the trade-offs. This work is slower and messier. It involves negotiation across sectors, jurisdictions, and interests. I mean, sitting at the table with people that you don't agree with and trying to work something out. That can be frustrating, especially in places that are facing urgent economic pressures. But what it builds is legitimacy, ownership, and durability. Speed can deliver projects, but democracy builds systems that can carry a community through economic shocks, demographic change, and the long work of regional renewal. So finally, in the end, community wealth building in Atlantic Canada isn't just about where the money goes. It's about who decides. It's about whether our hospitals, schools, municipalities, businesses, and community organizations see themselves as part of a shared civic economy, rooted in place, accountable to people, and committed to the long-term future of the region. If we want economies that truly serve our communities, we have to extend democracy into the economic realm itself. That's how we move from development done to communities to prosperity built by them. So that's just a few words just to kind of frame our discussion today. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. That little photo there, that's all the member owners of Just Us Coffee Co-op, by the way. Great little one. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first guest speaker. It's Sera Thompson. So Sera's a social innovator and master facilitator, creating movement around complex issues. She's a settler of European descent living in Mi'kma'ki, working to support deep shifts around social and environmental issues. A teacher and systems change facilitator, her work is focused on building capacity for deep democracy and creating movement around stuck challenges in leaders, organizations, and communities. Her work creatively engages a diversity of players finding shared clarity and timely actions. She began her career in the complex field of environmental management, weaving the needs of diverse players and balancing economic, ecological, and social sustainability. For the last 25 years, she has successfully led change with dozens of organizations on 5 continents in public sector, academia, nonprofit, and corporate sectors. So, without further ado, I'm going to hand the mic over to Sera.
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, it's lovely to be with all of you. I have some familiar faces here and some new faces, so it's nice to meet you. Yeah, and I think I kind of like have been sort of like half a facilitator and half-time facilitator, half-time teacher for most of my career. And I really particularly love to support folks within institution and within communities to think about how we can lead change in a more deeply democratic way. And yeah, I've done like dozens of projects that I think have some level of community decision making. Most often, they were initiated by kind of visionary municipal leaders who really wanted community input and buy-in and co-creation of important projects. And I've done that kind of across the Maritimes. Um, and yeah, I mean that this has been in like multiple the creation of multiple like work around more renewable transportation systems, around reconciliation, childhood development, culture and language preservation in Unamagi. And most recently, I've spent about 7 years traveling alongside as a consultant and then as a staff and kind of back as a consultant, Halifax Regional Municipality in the kind of building of their climate plan, which is called Halifax Acting on Climate Together. And I think the kind of principles that are so important if we want to do this kind of work is like framing conversations in a good way, building collective capacity, and having actually like methodologies to make decisions together that
Steffi?
work. Um, and I think, in Nova Scotia, in Mi'kma'ki, I live at home in Bannock or Dartmouth. I'm here today, and I think it's basically it is actually kind of like sounds like Takamagush, near Tattamagush. But I think in general, like we love our communities and we know our neighbors. And at the same time, we can easily get caught in camps or polarities. This has become obviously like an extreme global force with the rise of social media and the way algorithms and kind of probably malevolent political forces reinforce political bubbles online. But it's an old force in community life. Several years ago, I was leading a public engagement process uh, about, you know, there was a kind of a piece of land that maybe could become a new sports facility and like engaging communities if that they wanted that and what that would look like. And we did a series of engagements in both Halifax and Dartmouth, and this was probably like over 10 years ago. And when we did the public engagement in Halifax, several people, both of those engagement series were very well attended. And when I was in Halifax, a bunch of people came up to me and said, "Why are you going to Dartmouth? Nobody cares. Nobody's going to come." And then I went to Dartmouth and they were like, "Why are you going to Halifax? Nobody's going to come. Nobody in Halifax cares about this." And while I think the sort of across the harbor polarity has eased a little bit as time has gone on, I think we're maybe a little bit less of a heated rivalry there. Yeah, we still, I think, have a pretty intense urban-rural kind of rivalry. We have a pretty intense economic versus ecological rivalry. We have a kind of grassroots versus institutional rivalry, probably right versus left, practical versus radical. These kind of like tensions pop up everywhere. And so I think I'm really interested in our ability to create spaces that can like hold the bigger
What else?
picture and hold the whole of our
Guys, I'm just gonna
communities.
go check with the garbage.
And, how do we build trust? And how do we like work with the natural resistance that's there in communities when trust has been broken so many times by our institutions? How do we build capacity to make collective decisions and practice kind of smart consensus building that doesn't take that that is trustworthy but doesn't take forever? And how to unstick conflict and polarization when it comes up. Um, so I think, yeah, maybe just the example of the Halifax plan. Again, it was a really, really visionary municipal leader who was like, if we're going to have an effective climate strategy for this region, it has to be collectively owned. And from the very beginning, starting by having conversations and gathering, I think upwards of 70 people from organizations, academia, other levels of government, community-based organizations and environmental NGOs, the industry really coming together to originally like check the level of ambition that people were going to support for a climate plan and also what was going to be important. And this kind of I think one of the times we started by putting all the people who were part of government together, putting all the people who are part of academia together, putting all the people who are like really like grassroots ENGO people together, people from industry together. And we kind of asked this question like, what do other people say about you that isn't true? And what do you think, what do you want them to know about you? And like breaking down these kind of stories that we have about each other. And then at that point, we said, we don't know, like, what's the right goal for a decarbonization plan? Like, on this end of the room is net zero, and on this end of the room is like maybe 50% reduction by 2050. And it was like 90% of the room was over at net zero and was like, hurry up, let's go. And that, it gave the credibility with the political powers to make a really, really uh, ambitious climate plan. And all along the way, it's been really about creating groups of people who are committed together, looking at the like tremendous opportunities in the green building sector, but also in food and resilience in other ways. And so, yeah, I think it's like this is my passion. I'm happy to be here.
That's great. Thanks so much, Sarah. We're gonna hear from Robin next, and then we'll kind of open it up. And I would encourage folks as you're listening to both Sarah and Robin speak, if you while they're speaking, if you want to post a question, we can come back to it after they finished. But once we open things up after, you can just popcorn your question out as well, if that works better for you. Okay, so over to Robin Tress. So just a little introduction for Robin. Robin's an organizer and leader building political power in the climate justice movement. Um, Robin lives in okay, I'm going to butcher
It's
this.
Dartmouth.
Dartmouth. Um, she was politicized by former Prime Minister Harper's multiple assaults on democracy, climate justice, women's rights, and Indigenous peoples, and has been fighting for a more fair and sustainable future ever since. She works in the climate justice movement and is focused on building the necessary political power to win a fossil fuel phase out in Atlantic Canada. She works with Mi'kmaq water protectors or worked with Mi'kmaq water protectors in the fight to stop Alton gas in Nova Scotia for several years, and this deeply shaped her understanding and approach to solidarity, relationship to land, and social movement strategy. So over to you, Robin.
Thank you. Uh, I'm glad to be here. It's so great to talk to you and to hear from Sarah and just riff off each other a bit. Uh, yeah, I think that this is such an interesting topic, and I wanted to start by telling a little story because that's the only way I know how to do. So this is my living room. I live here now. I moved in last summer, and when I was moving in, it was like the middle of July. It was like the hottest day of the year. It was a Tuesday, so I like hired a couple movers, but mostly I didn't have any friends to come help me because everyone was at work. And I was like, end of the day, getting the last boxes in out of the truck. I was so exhausted and I was so sweaty. I'm carrying this giant box, and my neighbor, my new neighbor who I hadn't met yet, he was like out in the garage, and we were close enough to each other that it would be very rude and not a good first impression if I just didn't go say hello. So I put down my box. I'm sweating. I'm exhausted. I walk over and I was like, "Hey, I'm your new neighbor. My name's Robin. What's up?" And he was like, "Oh, I'm Mickey." And he's like, Mickey is like still in his high vis gear from work. He does heavy machinery work. So he's like wearing his big, like reflective cross. He's like smoking a dart in the garage after work. And the first thing he says to me is, "What kind of treats can your dog have?" And I was like, "Mickey, don't feed my dog." But then the second question he asked me was, what do you do for work? And at the time, I was working at the Council of Canadians, and we were right in the middle of a really big campaign to win national pharmacare all across the country. And we were mostly successful, but somewhat successful there. But it was July. I was sweaty. I was tired. I don't know this guy. He's wearing high vis. I didn't want to be like, "I work at an anti-capitalist organization." So I was like, I work at a nonprofit. And he was like, "Oh, cool. What does it do?" And I was like, yeah, how can what shall I say?" And so I said, we basically believe that the government should work for people and it shouldn't be run by corporations. It should be run by people." And he was like, "Oh, politics. Nice. Yeah. Don't get me started about that pandemic." And I was like, "What are the next words you're going to say?" And then, so I just said, "Oh, yeah." And thank God, Mickey had a perfect opinion. He said, "I can't believe how much money our government gave to Pfizer and Moderna to make that vaccine. And they didn't even have to pay tax the next year, even though they made so much money." And I was like, "Mickey, I like you. Yeah. Yeah." I was like, "Yeah, exactly that. I'm going to keep moving." So this was very, I don't know, it was very surprising to me. And it revealed kind of my own biases that I was walking into that situation with. Like, working guy in North Dartmouth wearing high vis. I wasn't sure where he was going to fall on that like political spectrum around the pandemic or politics or anything. But he has the real same feelings, maybe using different words than some of us might, but or some than anyone, I don't know. But the main thing I took from that was like all kinds of people in all kinds of like economic and social and political orientations can tell some really basic things that we all agree on. And it's that rich people have way too much money and way too much power, and corporations run by rich people, that the rest of us don't have enough. I mean, then I'm drawing now on other things beyond the conversation with Mickey. And also, I think something people can really agree on in different words and in different ways is that everything is too expensive and it's getting worse. um, I don't know if anyone else has heard this word, but the enshittification of everything is like everything is more expensive and worse quality than it has been in the past. And I think these are points that many, many, many people can really agree on, even if we come from different places in the political spectrum. And so this has been really, I'm so glad that I had that small conversation with Mickey, because it really, in the middle of a campaign where we were really fighting for a change to public service across the country, but on something that's like a bit technical, like what is pharmacare? Really, it just means bringing medical medicine into the healthcare system so you can access it for free or without a point of sale cost, like you would a hospital or a doctor's appointment. It's about being able to go to the pharmacy and get your pills, whether or not you've got money in your bank account. Um, Sometimes that gets really heady and confusing. It's often something people only like on the left really want. But I talked to Mickey and was like, "No, everybody can see it. Everybody can see that rich people have too much and we don't have enough, and that's not right. And we got to do something about it." So this was so great. I'm so glad that I had that conversation with Mickey. And it really, for me, relates to all the campaigns that I've been working on since, and the way that we finished out that one. Um, yeah, it just transformed the way I think about reaching people who are not like in my sphere or in my circle of influence typically. Uh, and I think that's so important. It really, yeah, it helped me see how important it is to talk to our neighbors, kind of regardless of what we know about them, whether we think that we're politically aligned or have all the same ideas, because there are so many core things that we do already agree on. And just being brave enough to have those conversations to bring people into some way of making change together it's the most powerful thing that we can do. Um, and I'm specifically talking about neighbors here, because they're the people around us, they're the people in our communities. Um, they're the people who we need to make change with, but I'm really struck these days, speaking of democracy, is what is going on in Minnesota right now with both the assault that ICE is bringing on the people of Minnesota, but also the way that people in Minnesota are responding to that. Um, it's really inspiring to me to see that. I think one thing I've learned about how people are organizing in their neighborhoods is that folks already in Minnesota have a real value on being a good neighbor, regardless of politics or whatever. There's a real sense that like it is a quality of a good person to be a good neighbor, and they've used that value to organize their communities really effectively all the way down to the street level, because the attacks that ICE is bringing are so intense and so um, focused that people now have fully organized their whole streets where everyone's on a little text chain, so that when there is an attack of ICE coming in, people are getting a notification of what street they're on. They're notifying the next street over and the next neighborhood over. And people have become really organized with their neighbors very quickly across political and economic lines. And I think it's very horrifying that they have to do that, but really inspiring to see that having such an incredible impact both on people's ability to stay in their homes, but also like physical safety and protection of people's lives. Um, so I have intense respect for organizing our neighbors to get the kinds of changes that we need to see on that like horrifying scale of impending active fascism, and on a more uh, perhaps light note of changes that we want to see here in Canada and here in Halifax area and Nova Scotia. Sera, I'm so glad that you brought up Halifax, because I think it's such a good example of where the strengths of community engagement and developing ideas together, bringing in community as a initial stakeholder in an idea like Halifax, it's so important. And I think you're absolutely right that that program came together largely because of a particular municipal leader who was really leading the charge there and made all of that possible. And something that I've seen since that particular municipal leader is gone is that that program is now under threat of having its budget massively, massively slashed, despite the agreement and support from community that it is such a good thing to do and will benefit people materially and financially. And so my mission, like my contribution to this work that we all do, is around campaigning around winning specific policy or other changes, and organizing people to be able to both build power together and then exercise that power to see the changes that we want. And so when I think about the Halifax situation, it affirms for me the need for our communities both to be united about the things we want, but also to be organized enough to win and protect the things that we have. I think that moment you're talking about, Sera, of like where folks at the consultation were really saying like, there's this perception that maybe people aren't on board with a fossil fuel transition. And then everyone obviously suddenly moves to one side of the room and is like, no, no, let's go. Like, we want this net zero thing. Let's do it. That shows to me the motivation is organized. People are on the same page. They want the same things. And now that that program is being defunded, it shows me that what we need to do next is take those people who are very united in their opinion and organize them in a way to be able to exercise their political power, because that process of exercising our power together, like, to me, that is the heart of local democracy. We don't have a functional local democracy if the mayor can just slash a budget line that everyone benefits from and everybody wants. But we definitely have more functional democracy when we have the power together to push back and stop that from happening, or to continue improving our like material experience of the cities, towns, and provinces we live in. Um, I just love community organizing. I think there's nothing we can't do if we're not or if we're organized. So that's where I'm coming from. Uh, and I'm seeing a couple questions coming in. So maybe I'll stop
Yeah.
there and we'll have a conversation.
So, Robin, I just wish you had a little more passion for this. It really doesn't come through. So I just want to kind of kick things off here just with I'm going to put a question. This is to both Sera and Robin, and again, I would really encourage folks in the audience to post your questions or just raise your hand or just speak up. When we were preparing for this webinar, we talked about a bunch of things. But we talked about the kind of the challenge of when we talk local democracy. Your the nature of the interaction is quite different than what is so dominant now, like namely like interacting through social media, where you can kind of get yourself in an echo chamber of people who you just know are going to agree with you, right? Or not, but I mean, at least you can kind of you can pick where the context. Whereas when you walk into a kind of a more of a local democracy situation, a community hall meeting or a working group or um, nonprofit board meeting for that matter, you don't have that knowledge, and it can be a source of rich diversity and can really enliven the discussion. But there's also some challenges with that, and I'm just wondering if you could respond to like what are kind of those unique challenges of when you're dealing with kind of a group of people who are there because they happen to live in the same area, not because they have the same opinion about a given topic, and how do you navigate that, and then what can result from that if you can navigate it. Either person can answer.
I
Sarah,
mean,
I feel like you
yeah,
have, yeah, you go ahead.
also, I can totally start. I mean, I think the one of the stories that came up the most when we were kind of prepping for this call is a project that I did several years ago in Unamagi, which is still going. It's called Raising the Villages or Mauiami Wijit Mwijuaji. And that was like, kind of kicked off by Jim Mustard, who was a municipal councilor for Inverness County. Um, and really like had a passion about, babies and young families and the power of especially when we're in Unamagi and in thinking about there's like three vulnerable, like threatened language and cultural groups, and how important, um, yeah, like strong cultural community spaces are like what happens in early childhood around language is so powerful, as well as for like the future of being a thriving human. And so we kind of invited a Mi'kmaq colleague to the table, and really there was like kind of a lot of buy-in from Wagaba and from Wagmatcook and from Port Hawkesbury and Victoria counties, like all of those kind of political levels were like, yes, we need to have this conversation, but really like, bringing in lots of community and nonprofits and public health and like who needs to talk about this and what does this need to um, yeah, who are the people that need to be in the room? And I think, right away, it's like there's a lot of tension between all of those communities, Gaelic community, the Acadian community, the Mi'kmaq community, and kind of English settler communities. And like this is a thing that everybody cares about it, but we care about it for different reasons and in different ways. And I think in that example, like being in a Mi'kmaq cultural space and starting with a lot of cultural things was a really important part of making it safe. And I think being able to have like real and hard conversations about colonial legacy and reconciliation, but like with a spirit of this is a shared goal that we all have and is like actually really sacred to everyone. And so we like believe that we can have these hard conversations and get through them in the spirit of we will be stronger together and we can work together.
Mhm.
And so I think it's like in every situation, it's going to be different depending on who the people are and what they're there for. But I think, like Robin said, like finding that underlying thing that we can all agree on, not
Yeah.
like just sweeping things that are really painful, important under the rug, making space for them, but making space for them in a way that's like, we're going to get through this because we care about that. And we're going to
Mm.
like bring a kind of a feeling of love. And, you know, in the climate space, I mean, I don't know. I just like, I was a person who felt very inspired by Barack Obama's first campaign. And I just always say, like, I think if we have a spirit of yes, we can, then that gets through a lot. Like, I don't, we can't pretend the hard stuff isn't there. But if we have like a heart of, and we're amazing, we're going to figure this out, then we can like move through those kind of things in a really good way. I think that's my first thought.
Yeah, no, that's great. Really, really, really wise. Robin, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think that I've never been in a situation where everyone agreed
Hmm.
on what the problem was, on what the answer is, or of how we should get there. And I don't think that will ever happen. But I think the like Sarah was saying, the core value or like the point of agreement that is so essential to building that political power that we can exercise to win things we want is just what Sarah was saying, like an understanding that we're in it together and that no one out there is going to fix it for us, for our communities. It's like this community needs to figure out what it is, what it needs, and how to get there. And it's never going to be clean and perfect, but it's going to be a whole lot better than whatever Elon Musk has to offer, you know? Um, and if we, and the consequence of not having that complicated, tough, messy, ongoing, forever process is that if we don't do that, we are going to get whatever bullshit Elon Musk or whichever billionaire of the day is going to offer to us. Um, and so coming to that place of understanding is so, so powerful that even if the answers we have are not perfect, they give us a path forward that is more democratic and more, I think, honest and compelling to
Yeah,
people. Um, yeah.
that's great. Great, thank you. We've got a question from the floor here. Paul Wortman said, Robin, at the National Farmers Union Convention, you spoke to the power that focus has. Can you speak to how you, with the Council of Canadians, decided to how to focus down?
Yeah. Um, sure. So when I don't work at the Council of Canadians anymore, but when I was, um, like many of you, I'm sure, we experienced the thing where like the whole world is on fire and everything is broken and we could have done any one of a million things. Um, but over the last couple of years, for a couple of years, we really focused one campaign on national farm care, as I mentioned. And we did that for a couple of reasons. One was that trying to run several campaigns or work on several issues at a time as one organization is really hard. Like, it's really hard. You get pulled in 100 directions. People don't know which way to go. And like, it's just hard to organize your base that way. And so we really wanted to have one really clear focus for a little while. And an immediate challenge with that is like being a multi-issue organization. There were people who were like, well, I don't really care about pharmacare. And so we had some work to do to convince people that like, no, no, you do though, because the base kind of unifying feature of the Council of Canadians is that people come with some kind of understanding that corporate power is a scourge in Canada and in our communities. And it plays out in many different ways with water and climate change and healthcare and whatever, international trade. And so, starting with that point of agreement, we were able to bring some people over. Some of our strategic decisions around why that one issue was the real focus was that um, one, the Liberals had promised legislation on the topic after 60 years of being campaigned to do so. So we had a legislative opportunity that was really clear. And the pharmaceutical industry in Canada is a lot more like the pharmaceutical industry in the US than anyone, I think, cares to admit most of the time. So there was a real danger that if we didn't do pharmacare right, we would entrench a really bad corporate problem that would pull our whole healthcare system closer to an American style than a Canadian style. Um, and also, there was a bit of a fever pitch where insulin prices specifically, but also prices of other medications were really skyrocketing rapidly. Um, I didn't know this until I started working on it, but like medication prices in Canada have gone up 30% in the last 10 years for absolutely no reason other than greed. And so there was this kind of perfect storm of political contexts where we realized by doing a good scan of what's going on politically in the country that there was a real opportunity to make a meaningful impact on millions of people's lives by winning something that would bring down their cost of living in an extreme. And there was a real opportunity to really confront the corporate power that the pharmaceutical industry has to write the laws of our healthcare system. And so we were like, it doesn't get much better than that. Like, if we can win that one, we're really taking on corporate power in a structural way that will leave people advocating and seeking more better public health care. It will leave them in a better position in the future because the pharmaceutical industry will have less money because they won't be able to profit so much from our pockets. So we were like, this is very structural. And so we must fight. And we really focused in. We decided to put a lot of other issues on the back burner for a couple of years, which was a choice that I will admit was not always popular, but I put my foot down and I have no regrets. But it was very hard. And then we took up some new tactics to bring in new people. We typically often just organize the people in our base. We were pulling on lefties. We were trying to organize lefties who were already with us. But one example is in the pharmacare campaign. Once we had that focus and we were like, we are trying to win a structural change to the way corporate power operates and the way that this legislation could help people, instead of just blasting our lists and talking to the people we already know, one thing we did was that we had our volunteers standing outside pharmacies, handing out flyers as people were leaving and having little conversations that often started with, hey, you just left the pharmacy. I bet that that was really expensive. And people would be like, you wouldn't believe it. And like, we were meeting people at their point of pain and bringing them into a really powerful campaign that ended up sort of winning. Now there's legislation. It's not applied in all provinces yet. It only covers 2 medical classes, but it covers insulin, and that is a real expensive medication. So there's room to grow. But yeah, the point there was that like by focusing really clearly on an extremely strategic goal and just going all in, well, like 90% in,
Mm-hmm.
we could really get somewhere. And it gave our membership a really clear focus. And not only our membership, but like people from the public who are not yet engaged. And I think something I experience every day almost is people looking around and being like, wow, this is a hellscape, but I have no idea what to do about it. And so like being able to formulate an extremely clear way to be like, join us, do this, do that, then we're going to do this, then we're going to win. People were like, yeah, okay, let's go. Um, and so having that level of focus, yeah, it really helped accomplish our goals. You don't always get that perfect storm of context that I was describing, but I do think that it's in front of us more than we know because the way that corporate power has so wholly infiltrated all levels of our democracy. I do think those opportunities are in front of us more than we might currently think.
Yeah. Well, so much good stuff there. I wish we had like a lot longer for this webinar.
I I
Um,
I have a quick thought on the second question here, if
yeah, yeah, yeah. Go ahead,
from Sarah.
Sarah.
Yeah, I mean, I think I love that question so much, and I think I think with the climate work, like having the for a while, really strong political wind at our back, and knowing that the most vulnerable communities are going to be the most impacted by climate change. It was like a really big focus of the work. And I think like a couple of things that I think are interesting experiments. Not all of them were successful, but the Clean Foundation really started a project that was about trying to fund people, Indigenous and African Nova Scotian, Mi'kmaq and African Nova Scotian leaders, um, to be like to learn about and to actually like be funded to sit on boards and sit on committees and help yeah, mobilize information in their communities around green energy and the economic opportunities around green energy. They also had like a whole apprenticeship program that was for people who have been traditionally left out of the economy to learn trades that are high in demand, like energy auditors. We did a program with the Halifax Innovation Outpost, which is like was a part of the Halifax Partnership, the sort of economic development organization that was about do you have an idea either about how to make your community more resilient or about how we might decarbonize our communities? And we're going to just give you money just to like get the idea more clear and having sort of like a cohort who was like prototyping ideas. And both of those times we really actively outreach to African Nova Scotian newcomer and Mi'kmaq communities. And most of the grantee, like in all, we did it 3 times, and all of the times more than half of the recipients were from those communities. I think a big part of it is like those communities are like much less resource. And in the last five,
Hmm.
10 years, there's a feeling of like, oh, we need those voices at the table. So a lot of those people who like are ready to be at that table and are tuned in and whatever are having like 20 people calling them to sit at their table. It's not helpful. Like we actually have to put resources there and build relationships. And but I mean I agree so much, and I think that it's like continuing to keep it front of mind and figuring out how to resource it.
Yeah, yeah. It's such an important point, and in the kind of the strategic discussions that we have at the Center for Local Prosperity, we always try to remind ourselves that the work that we do has to be responsive to the folks um, who are not potentially going to be in crisis, but who are in crisis and who need help now, and have great resources to apply as well for that. But but if you just listen to the folks who come to the meetings, it's often not always, but often the folks who have the luxury of going to these meetings, right? They can get there, right? Um, and you lose the perspectives of folks who are actually in it, right? So that's such a really good point and a great response as well.
Yeah.
Um,
Sorry, can I just add, in my experience, I've worked a lot with Mi'kmaq communities and less so with African Nova Scotian communities, but in my experience, Mi'kmaq communities tend to actually be quite organized in a way that at first I found surprising because it just looked different than the kind of organizing that I was familiar with. And so I've learned that these communities tend to be quite well organized. They know each other really well. They are small, tight-knit communities. And people are doing the work anyway. But like Sarah said, they're not well resourced. And so I found myself in a position many times of trying to figure out how to be a resource or like make more resources available. So like in the fight against salt and gas, at first, like it was also funny because I was like 24 and I was just full of piss and vinegar, even more so than I am today. And so I came in swinging, and people were like, "Calm down, lady." But I found people really did actually. I mean, I shouldn't be speaking as if I'm surprised. People had a very strong strategy about how to protect the things that they wanted to protect in their community and build that out. And I had to learn over a couple of years how to be a resource person where like I have an education in environmental science. So I got to be the science translator for environmental assessments, which was
mhm,
horrible and useful. And like we got to do fundraising, and I always had to deal with the government because they didn't want to. Frankly, they could have, but they were like, we have better things to do than talk to bureaucrats. And I was like, I don't. I'll do that. So finding our ways also to understand, like doing it is, and I'm still learning, it's difficult work to recognize strategies and organizing and approaches that are different than the ones we already know. But like I encourage everyone, if you are not already knowing this, that like these communities do have goals and strategies that they want to use, and it's our
mhm.
job to resource them.
Great. That's great. Thank you. So we've just got not a huge amount of time left. I would like to put a question to both Sarah and Robin. Maybe we'll hear from Sarah first. Just thinking about the folks in the room here who are obviously interested in this topic. What's your what's a piece of advice, a bit of wisdom you can share to the folks on the call that they can take when they they're planning to walk in that room, maybe for the first time with a diverse group of people. Like what's something that you can, a bit of advice or a tip or something you can offer them to help navigate that and be have a good start. And we'll start with Sera.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe I would say it also, again, it depends on the context, but I would say before you walk in the room is really important.
Uh-huh.
And the number of projects that I've had where I'm like, who are the hubs here? Like, who are the people that everybody knows and everybody respects and everybody's already talking to? And maybe totally like unexpectedly or surprisingly, or it wouldn't be obvious how they link to the issue, but like, let's invite them and let's be like, what's going on? Like, what are people thinking about? What do they need? Like, what would make this appealing? What would be a risk that we aren't seeing? Like, having, almost like getting getting the intel from the hub, and then when they feel like they told you and you heard it and the thing that's in the middle feels like exciting and real and true, then it's like, will you invite all your people? And then the people come because they were invited by somebody they trust.
Right.
The thing was shaped already by more voices. So I think that's like before you get in the room. And then, yeah, for me, it's just like, I think when people, number one, they have so much wisdom and intelligence. And number two, when we really feel heard, we are much more likely to buy in. So if it's 20 people, can we go around the circle? If it's 40 people, can we have little trios or pairs to like
Mhm.
talk and say and hear back? But like, it's like almost at every step of the way, we're democratically building this together and every voice matters. Um, I think, yeah, I think beyond the things that we've said already, those are some big ones for me.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Sera. Robin, we get about 3 minutes. What's your advice to the folks in the room?
I mean, it's basically the same as Sarah's. It matters a lot what you do before you get in. Um, we also do like slight, I think we come in at different moments of the change making process, but I do like when connecting with a new group, I usually am trying not to be the one who's at the front or doing the convening, rather having like a partner from the community do that and then introduce me and really make the time more focused on hearing from the people in the room. Um, my own foolishness surprises me even now that like sometimes before a meeting I'll be like, I'm gonna listen. I'm mostly gonna listen. And then I get there and I still have to be like, shut up, Robin, let other people talk. And so I'm fighting the two wolves within myself to make sure that first gathering also is really about me listening and asking questions. But yeah, I don't need to blather on about it.
Okay. Well, we do have, if we have one more question from the floor before we wrap up, if there is anything people want to put to our two esteemed speakers. For being so polite. Yeah.
I have a question if no one else does.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Paul.
Uh, could you both speak to organization collaboration when, say, one organization's capacity for change is limited? Please.
Sarah, do you go ahead if you want to.
I mean, I think that's like a lot of what we were doing with Halifax, and in particular, we partnered with How We Thrive and the Ecology Action Center around some of the like resident capacity building and community engagement. And there's a feeling of like, and I think Just Food is like similar. It's like the Ecology Action Center has networks, but also has kind of freedom that the municipality doesn't have. The municipality in that case has funding and some like, like calm support and staff support and things that we can do. But you know, and How We Thrive is like, you know, had like a lot of like great like curriculum development capacity. And I think the best, I mean, if you can, if you have the will and you have the people who are like excited to collaborate, like playing to each organ, you know, and there was like lots of times they were like, yeah, How We Thrive in Ecology Action Center, we're not going to do that because we're the municipality. I wish we were more live. I wish there's things I wish were different, but this is who we are. This is the animal that we are. This is the climate that we're in. And also you can't say that on our behalf. Like, you know, it's like this negotiation that has to happen. I think that we have to work with reality as it is while we're trying to change it and play to our strengths.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great. Thanks, Sarah. Any
Yeah.
final thoughts, Robin?
Uh, Perhaps not a surprise to you all. I play a role that is sometimes unpopular, which is like really educate, agitate, organize. And so agitation is required at some point. And so something I've been trying in the last couple of years is collaborating with allies within the bounds that make sense for us. And so I think where often I'm in a position that is a little bit unique, which is around like really organizing, really pushing an envelope, it is really important in collaborations to identify the differentiation between different organizations' roles, where some might be able to play a like direct contact with decision maker, friendlier, reasonable voice. And then there's a different position where people in community really need to be like, God damn it. Like that's good and both need to happen. And so recognizing that both will happen, they are different approaches. There'll be important collaboration and also points of separation where it's important not to be in collaboration, I think is so freeing. I think I didn't know that. I didn't know that for a long time, but like it's important at times to be entirely in step and it's important at times to not be aligned or like to have a diversity of tactics around making change. And so I just have learned to feel less shy about that and be much clearer. This happened a lot during the pharmacare campaign. Like I said in the chat, the reason that we ended up in this position where there was a promise of legislation was due to literally 6 decades of multiple organizations advocating that we needed that program. And when it came time to make the program, there needed to be the inside government relations policy development, and there needed to be people outside being like, my kid died because they couldn't afford their medication, do it right. So and that point needed to be a different set of tactics, and so there was not always agreement, and it all worked out.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Robin. Thank you, Sarah. As always with these webinars, we could go deeper and longer. If you are engaged with this topic, as we do with all of our webinars, we will have a follow-up meeting. We call it the community practice meeting. It's same time, same day. So next week, Thursday at noon. It's just an open discussion time from 12 to 1, where if you want, you can pick up on the topic of, of the previous webinar or anything else. So it's really kind of an open discussion period. So if you want to really dig into this topic, you'll have that opportunity to do that. We'd love to see you there. Our topic for our February webinar is going to be kind of shining a light on the transition town movement. And we're going to have our CLP's founder, co-founder, and current Transition St. Margaret's Bay member, Bob Cervelli, speaking, but we're also going to have other folks from the transition movements there to speak February. So again, last Thursday of the month. And Nike, help me out. What's the March topic going to be?
We're talking about folk schools, so sort of rural reskilling, Skillshare, how to organize one.
Yeah. So and just a final note, folks, what you're going to notice in this kind of second season of our webinars is we're going to start shifting our focus into kind of how to. And so most of the topics will be like how to start a folk school, how to lead a community organizing effort. And that's really coming from insight that Nike has shared and energy that they brought to the discussion. So you'll see that as the new topics roll out. Again, thank you so much for coming, and again, thank you to our guest speakers. And hopefully, if you want to pick up on this conversation, we'll see you there next week.
Bye, everyone.
Nice to see you.